Hi, and welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chang Alfares with the top reports from the global economy. Coming up today, Brazil opens a green stadium, and Lebanese farmers defiantly grow cannabis. First, the headlines. Workers in developing countries are increasingly moving to better jobs and joining the middle class, though 839 million workers still earn less than $2 a day. The International Labour Organization, in a report, noted that developing countries are generally in a process of catching up with the advanced economies. More than 4 in 10 workers are considered to be in the so-called developing middle class, meaning that they earn more than $4 a day. But 85% of the workforce in the developing world will still be living below the U.S. equivalent poverty line in 2018.
Around 200 million new jobs are needed in the next 5 years to keep pace with growing working-age population in emerging and developing countries. Now, overall, in the next 5 years, there will be 213 million new labour market entrants. And the vast majority of these, 200 million, will be in the developing countries. So the job creation challenge is felt most particularly in the developing and emerging world.
China's interest rate swap slid to an 11-month low on speculation monetary policy will be loosened to combat a slowdown. The cost of one-year swaps fell 5 basis points to 3.56% in early trade on Tuesday. Chinese rates are expected to stay low in anticipation of monetary easing and the ongoing risk of a larger deterioration in the property market. Premier Li Keqiang, in a recent statement, said policies will be fine-tuned when needed to solve issues such as any shortage of funds for the real economy. Japan's net external assets rose to a record $3.2 trillion as a weak yen boosted the value of overseas holdings, making the country the world's biggest creditor nation for 23 years in a row. According to the Finance Ministry, Japan's net external assets were more than 1.5 times those held by China, the world's #2 creditor nation. Germany follows in third place with $1.9 trillion. Japan's gross external assets rose 20.4% to $7.8 trillion, up for a 5th consecutive year, and direct investment overseas by Japanese firms increased by a record $127 billion to $1.1 trillion. Global mining giant Rio Tinto Tuesday said it has formalized an agreement with Guinea's government to develop the world's biggest untapped iron ore deposit. After years of wrangling over the $20 billion deal, the Cimento iron ore project will create Africa's biggest ever infrastructure venture. The project is forecast to boost Guinea's annual revenue by $1.2 billion through income tax and royalty payments. Could also pump billions more into Guinea's economy, which is still recovering from decades of military dictatorships and misrule. French hotel operator Accor is buying back nearly 100 hotels in Europe that it had previously sold for $1.23 billion. The decision marks a sharp U-turn from Accor's previous plan to become a hotel brand operator rather than owner. Accor had sold and leased back real estate to free up capital needed to boost its presence in emerging markets. Accor is buying back 86 hotels in Germany and the Netherlands it had sold for about $1 billion in 2007 and 11 others in Switzerland. Among the 12 venues of the 2014 World Cup, in the Brasilia Stadium hopes to be the first one to get the highest distinction in sustainable design. More in this report.
Even the president of Brazil came to witness the inauguration of Brasilia's Mangarrincha Stadium, reborn from its ashes and now at the forefront of ecology. It's the work of a team of architects and experts in environmental design who studied the city's climate and the stadium's surroundings in great detail. Their goal has been to create the first net-zero energy stadium in the world.
There are many different factors playing into the creation of a green stadium. One of the most important ones is for the stadium to have a central location, easy to get to for the supporters before and after the match. The Brasilia Stadium is different from the others in Brazil because it's at the city's centre.
The goal is to facilitate access to the stadium by foot and bike in order to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. An area built to accommodate 3,500 bikes has been built in order to encourage people to leave their cars behind. Brasilia wants to go even further by making everything recyclable.
We want to create a unique way to deal with garbage, fully organic. Therefore, all the plates, the cups, the cutlery, the napkins will be biodegradable. The supporters will no longer have to sort their waste. They'll put everything in one bin, and it will all be treated, composted and reused.
A large roof that will reduce the absorption of the sun's rays is another of the stadium's special features. As a result, a lot less air conditioning will be needed. The architects have also ensured the stadium will be naturally ventilated, thanks to these columns which fit in perfectly with the rest of the city, conceived by the famous architect Oscar Niemeyer. But the solar panels will have to wait until the World Cup is over to be installed on the stadium's roof. The final goal is to have a self-sufficient stadium.
The
stadium will have various resources that will enable it to generate more energy than it consumes, such as solar panels. It will collect rainwater that will cover 80% of its needs.
Once all the work is completed, the stadium hopes to be the world's first to achieve the LEED Platinum certificate, the ultimate accolade in sustainable development.
We're joined now by i24 Sports magazine anchor Jonathan Regev for a discussion about the upcoming World Cup. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We saw a beautiful stadium. Okay, it's supposed to be self-sufficient. I don't entirely understand why it is necessary. I understand the UN really wanted this, but is this necessary? Is this a prototype for a future stadium that we're going to see around the world?
Yes, it is. You're asking if it's absolutely necessary? No, we're seeing regular stadiums, I'll call it, all around the world. But it is a necessity in the means that, yes, we are looking for a world with more recycling, with less electricity usage. Therefore, yes, this stadium could be a prototype for other stadiums. And I have to say, what a difference between the general way Brazil is preparing as a whole for the World Cup, with all the mess and on all the construction deadlines not met. And yet we see this beautiful stadium with a beautiful purpose being built just on time, just with all the proper plans. Everything was set on time. What a difference between the way Brazil is preparing as a whole and this in Brasilia. If all the preparations would look like this, then Brazil would be absolutely ready. But we're 3 weeks away, and we're far from that, believe me.
Right. It's not, I mean, looking at it from the perspective of a poor person living in a favela, I mean, it's not a waste of money to build this sustainable stadium?
Absolutely. Look, the sustainable stadium is obviously, it's good, it's interesting, it's a prototype. Yet, if you're the poor Brazilian living in a favela, what would you say? You'd say, well, what about the healthcare? What about Medicare? Right. What about our situation? What about the way we build? Why should we spend billions and billions of dollars to attract all these people coming in, looking at our beautiful stadiums, beautiful, whereas such a major part of the population, they simply struggle to survive
they probably
day in, day
themselves
out.
Can't actually afford to buy a ticket to go to the stadium, right?
Not to mention, I mean, the tickets are very, very, very expensive. A lot of them are sold to tourists coming from abroad or to rich Brazilians. The average Brazilian living in a favela, he cannot afford it. He just has, and plus he doesn't have the time to go because he has to work all the time just to survive. So as far as the people in the favelas are concerned, they don't understand why all this is necessary. Not only the sustainable stadium, but this whole fuss about the World Cup and the Olympics also in 2016.
Although, I mean, at the same time, when you say, the World Cup in general, I mean, surely even people in the favelas do care about Brazil being, the soccer star, the World Cup 2014. They obviously surely love soccer,
and
correct?
they would chant their national team. Obviously, we know that football in Brazil is much more than a national obsession. It's the biggest thing, and yes, it is a privilege to host the World Cup. But having said that, if you're a poor person living in the favela, you want food, you want healthcare, you want Medicare. But that's much more important than, even more important than football. Unbelievable, Indeed. But that's the case.
Absolutely. Jonathan Regev, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you. Despite a growing trend of legalizing cannabis use, growing the weed remains illegal in most places around the world. But given how cheap and easy it is to grow, some farmers take their chances. Here's more on cannabis growers in Lebanon.
In Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, farmers grow cannabis. This farmer has cultivated numerous crops such as wheat and potatoes, but the cost of growing cannabis on a quarter of an acre is between $100 and $150, and it can yield up to $3,000, a return worth fighting for.
We want to live as everyone else does. If they want a confrontation, that's no problem for us. It will be harvest season soon. If they want to come for us, they are welcome. If they want to legalize it, we'll thank them and tell them they are good people.
The annual attempts by authorities to crush the grow operations has only garnered slight success historically because the farmers often take up arms to protect their crops. Since 2012, the attempts have been on hiatus, according to the Drug Enforcement Unit, because of the need to focus attention on the Syrian crisis. For these farmers, the lack of legal framework for growing is a mistake. Creating a regulated system for growing and selling the plant could be beneficial for the state and farmers, they say.
We don't like cultivating by force and making problems. When the state legalizes it and gives licenses, as they do for tobacco cultivation, we would abide by that, and the state would receive revenues from us.
Meanwhile, some economists suggest that legalization could have widespread benefits that ought to be seriously considered. A claim backed up in Forbes, which reports that Colorado is set to take in up to $40 million of additional revenue from the regulated sale of the green plant.
I consider that Lebanon needs this farming and needs to revive the Bekaa and the Akka regions. And according to my estimates, legalizing the cannabis crop and its exportation abroad to the United States or some of the European countries where it is allowed, we would have $2 billion to the Lebanese economy and $400 million to the state budget. So really, at this stage of our lives, it would have a big impact.
There is a long history throughout peace and conflict of growing cannabis here, and it seems likely that the cultivation of this crop will remain a reality for the foreseeable future in this region, with or without approval from the government and other international agencies.
And now over to Media Watch for a look at reports from around the world with i24 News journalist Daniel Roth. Daniel,
hey,
thanks for joining us again.
How's it going?
Good, good, good. So Technica.com has a story about Tesla, from what I understand.
Yeah, Tesla has recently become the biggest auto industry employer in California.
Unbelievable. Now, this says something about Tesla, but also about California.
Yeah, well, one of the things it says about California is that the auto industry is leaving California, the classic auto industry.
Right.
Toyota, who currently employs about 5,300 people, they're moving that operation to Texas.
Right.
Meanwhile, Tesla's got about 6,000 people working for them. They're going to add another 500 next year. They're, growing and growing right now, and you can see that Tesla is going to continue to grow. And California seems like a good place for that, considering also the kind of high-tech connection, the Silicon Valley connection, the startup thing.
Now, a lot of the jobs that they've taken, they've taken on people, sort of more blue-collar workers, so to speak, or they're taking people with more of an advanced sort of electronics degree. Is there any kind of detail about that?
It's not actually detailed, and it's an interesting that you bring it up, that, here we see 6,000 jobs created by this project. But when you compare that to the 106,000 jobs that in IB Times they're reporting, 106,000 jobs lost by Nike. And Nike's been replacing jobs.
Nike alone?
Yeah, just in Nike, they've been replacing factory workers primarily with robots.
Oh, wow.
So they're installing robots at so when you compare the Tesla growth, 6,000, to 106,000 lost, you've still got a deficit of 100,000 jobs if you kind of look at the human race as one global people and think about global unemployment. That's a huge deficit, and it's not only these two examples you see kind of across the board, these kinds of shifts.
A great plot for a dystopian, mystery in the making.
Yes, it's indeed.
Oh wow, okay.
It's if you look at other examples, Twitter, for example, employs a few hundred or a few thousand people, not even, and Kodak, which is going out of business, employed hundreds of thousands of people, and they're done.
Sure. Well, yeah, it was a given, right? The world is increasingly computerized and more, based on technology, and obviously robots are part of that.
Right.
Isn't it better that robots should do like the hard work and people should just sit back and enjoy their martinis?
Well, only if there's a way for people to actually enjoy martinis without associating it with
the inflated price of martinis.
Right.
Right.
If people can afford to sit back and drink martinis, then it's good. But we don't have systems set up for that yet. So you got 100,000 people looking for work because that's their only basis for.
All right. Well, let's see quickly the last story you have here.
Yeah. So Forbes had this piece. Essentially, fair trade isn't so fair. SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, did this study. They found out most of the money is going to producers, not workers. There seems to be wage gaps that are sometimes larger in fair trade companies than not. And really, what it calls to question is that fair trade needs better regulations.
Maybe the robots will eventually actually take the benefits. Thank you very much, Daniel and Roth, for joining us. That's the end of this show. Thank you very much. I'm being Michelle Faris. Send us your comments and join us again tomorrow.